Believe it or not, the ultimate teen comedy Clueless turns 20 this Sunday.
Oh my God.
And I don't even have to tell you that that is the absolute most wonderful thing of the week. The most wonderful thing, the most wonderful thing of the week.
As if.
It's been 20 years since Clueless first entered our lives, and yet it still feels as fresh and relevant today as it did when it was first released. So, to help us understand why that is, please welcome to the show pop culture writer and author of As If, Jen Chaney.
Thank you so much for having me.
In all your research, why do you think Clueless has stayed so relevant all these years?
There's obviously the nostalgia factor, the people who saw this when they were teenagers in the 1990s. I think the story it's telling is really timeless in a lot of ways. I mean, it's based on a novel by Jane Austen, Emma. But then the other thing that I think is really interesting, Amy Heckerling sort of tapped into what our culture was going to look like before it started looking that way. For example, with the cell phones. Obviously, the cell phones people use in Clueless are really outdated and they look like they're talking on a huge brick, basically.
Like the Zach Morris phones from Saved by the Bell.
Exactly. But the idea that they're all on the phone and using it so much, that wasn't what most people were doing in 1995, but now, obviously, it certainly is.
Do you think that there's any teen movie in recent years that has the potential staying power that Clueless obviously has?
I think the last one that people consistently cite is Mean Girls.
Right.
But that's been, 10 years ago now. There have been some good teen movies in the decades since, but I don't know that there's been something that's really sort of hit the zeitgeist and felt like it captured a generation in the same way that a movie like Clueless did or that some of the John Hughes movies did. Mm-hmm. There's been things like The Hunger Games, which are in this totally imagined different world that really doesn't connect to the high school experience. So I'm kind of waiting for that moment to happen again. I'm sure it will.
Just looking at Clueless and Mean Girls, comparing those two, what do you think that they bring to the table that, say, these other movies just haven't really done?
Well, I mean, one thing for sure is quotability. People quote Mean Girls and Clueless all the time still, even though they came out 10 years and 20 years respectively ago. I think Clueless and I think Mean Girls just sort of tapped into something that was kind of brewing in the culture at the time and just felt like they were of the right moment.
Right.
And that's such a sort of ephemeral, magical thing that it's really hard to figure out how to even suggest that someone replicates that. It just has to happen.
Thank you so much for joining us today and just breaking down Clueless for us 20 years after the fact. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I cast my vote for Mean Girls as the next Clueless, but I want to hear from you. So tell me which teen movie you think will stand the test of time like Clueless has using #MostWonderful.